Health Minister, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, has made it clear that all vaccines will be acquired and distributed by the national government, but two organizations are not taking this decision lying down. Union Solidarity and NGO AfriForum has instructed their legal team to prepare a case to challenge government's monopoly over vaccine acquisition and distribution. I'm now joined by Connie Mulder, the head of Solidarity Research Institute, to tell us more about this challenge. Connie, a very good morning to you. Thank you for your time. You are saying that the government's monopoly on buying and distributing the COVID-19 vaccines is something that you want to take to court. Tell us why and what forms the merit of your case.
Yes, Mbo. I think for us to understand the action that we're taking, we first need to understand the significance of a vaccination program. Without a proper vaccination program being rolled out in South Africa and a large part of the population being vaccinated, we are looking at perpetual lockdown until enough people die for us to reach herd immunity. Now, that could be 2023, 2024. And South Africa simply cannot afford this. So it is of critical importance that our population gets vaccinated as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And it's in this instance where we're actually sort of flabbergasted by the government then insisting that they will be the sole supplier and distributor of vaccines. Now, this is the same government that has dropped the ball, quite frankly, on the rest of the pandemic. We haven't acquired any vaccines yet. And now they're insisting that no one else tries to pick up the ball. So we're not saying government should not buy vaccines. Obviously, government should be one of the buyers of vaccines. We're saying, why gatekeep this? Why not let any private medical aid, any private employer, why not let any private individual talk to manufacturers if they can and get the vaccine and get themselves or their members or their employees vaccinated so that we can get a larger part of our population vaccinated as quickly as possible to ultimately move back to just a normal life and to get this economy back on track. And that is what we're worried about. Is you've got any government that would have said this would have worried us, but this one in particular. Remember, this is the same government that cannot provide textbooks to schools, that stole PPE funds in the middle of a pandemic, and that still can't provide power from a central point, who are now insisting that they will be able to provide vaccines for the whole country with a central planning system. Now, we've seen this movie. We know how it ends. We're not going to stand for it, and we're quite frankly, we want everyone who wants to buy a vaccine to be able to buy a vaccine. We cannot have this gatekeeping.
We've heard a lot of mixed messages. We've seen the late start and some unrealistic vaccination targets that have been set out. And a lot of people in the health sector have been complaining about some of these big challenges that you mentioned. Talk to us then about how you want to ensure that this access is granted and how you think it should work when it comes to the rollout of the vaccine.
Quite frankly, South Africa has been asleep at the wheel. Brazil has already ordered 200 million cases of vaccines. The UK ordered 340 million in August, and we have just not been doing anything. And we begged India for 1.5 million. Now we've got 60 million people in the country, and we're seeing this as something to celebrate. So we're way behind the curve, and we need to catch up. From our perspective, it's very simple. You've got already the private sector with cold chain logistics set up to handle vaccines and to handle medicine. We just want government to step out of the way, basically, to enable all of these private sector chains who already do it, to start talking to manufacturers directly and get vaccines from there directly. The problem that we're facing at the moment is you've got the Department of Health that says we will be the sole buyer and distributor, and if the private sector wants to contribute, they can give us funds, but they will not be able, and then we'll tell them who to distribute to and where to distribute to. Now, this has not worked at all, and we're very, very skeptical about giving the government funds in any form, since we've seen what happens when you give this government funds. A portion of that tends to disappear, and we don't want to be here in a year's time with a vaccine commission investigating what went wrong and why only ANC members got vaccines and anything like that. So that's what we're going on. The legal grounds that we're using. Okay, the advocates get angry at me if I run too far ahead. We're finalizing that tomorrow, actually. But it just comes down to there's no actual legal power for government for Mr. Mkhize to do this. He's trying to implement some of the central tenets of the National Health Insurance, the NHI, without the legal framework actually being there for central buying and for blocking private buyers from accessing these manufacturers. It's a free market. You cannot actually stop them.
I want you to hold that thought, and for us to continue our conversation on the other side of this. We have to break our conversation, but returning to that conversation with Connie Mulder, head of Solidarity Research Institute, about their court action. That's coming up shortly after this. So I continue my conversation with Connie Mulder, the head of Solidarity Research Institute, who is giving us a sense and some clarity as how they don't want the state to have the only say on who gets a vaccine and how and when the private sector can help so much. Speaking about their court action and the implementation processes there, Connie, thanks for staying with us. You were speaking about some of the reasons why you feel it important to launch this court action, but we also know that the Department of Health has been very vocal about some of their concerns when it comes to the rollout of this vaccine, speaking about how there's a huge security issue, saying that countries that have begun rolling out this vaccine have warned that there's the huge factor of theft, and that even if they disclose, they can't disclose much about the centrality of this vaccine and the processes that will be needed to roll it out. What do you say to that when it comes to the implementation?
Well, if the problem is that people are desperate to get the vaccine, which I think we know it is, then the answer is most definitely not to have it centrally planned and distributed. That just means that we're going to be waiting for vaccination until 2022, 2023, and then the security problem is going to be completely out of control. The answer most likely is to get as many vaccines as you can into the population as quickly as can, and that means get all hands on deck. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Allow any private supplier or any private company that wants to buy this vaccine and to give it to their employees if they want. Allow medical aids to buy it, to give it to their members. Allow NGOs to buy it and to give it to their members or the community that they're looking after. At the moment, the government is basically acknowledging that we have got massive demand and then saying that they will be the sole supplier and limiting that supply severely. So whatever security problems other countries had, we're going to have a massive problem if we don't get enough vaccines that the country demands. And the demand is high for a reason, is we cannot go on with life as normal until we've got this pandemic under control. And the only way out of this is having a proper vaccination program. And that goes back to our first point, which is we don't get why government is sidelining every other player in this instance. Security is the issue. Surely we can get the police involved and private security involved and say, let's have let's have a security change, let's have private companies looking after the vaccine. But if private companies buy it, then they're most likely going to have security at their warehouses because it's now their property and they want to distribute it. Having this planned centrally, we've seen this with load shedding, we've seen this with power. It does not work, and you do not have enough to cater for the demand. And if we're going to be in that situation with we're now at almost 3 million people losing their jobs and a country that cannot move forward until we've got the vaccine, we're heading for a disaster if we've got this gatekeeping going on from the Department of Health. And that is why we're heading to court. It's not to say the government should not buy vaccines. Obviously, the government should also buy vaccines. It is quite simply to say, why stop everyone else from doing it? Allow private companies to talk to the manufacturers. Allow anyone in South Africa who wants to buy a vaccine an avenue to buy it. Otherwise, as we saw with the cigarette ban, as we're seeing with alcohol now, you're just going to drive people into the illicit trade. And then we're looking at a situation where people get what they think is a vaccine and it's not necessarily. And we don't want to go there. We've been there with alcohol, with illegal cigarettes. Let's not go to illegal vaccines as well.
And Connie, very lastly, before we let you go, just give us a sense of your court preparedness and what legal grounds you'll base your arguments on, as well as the timeframes that you're looking at.
So unfortunately, I can't go into too much detail on advice of the advocates. They get quite angry if we run ahead of the court case. But our court documents are being finalized tomorrow, and we should most likely be handing this to the court in the next week or two to make sure that we've got this under control. What is massively worrying, however, is that apart from this first 1.5 million doses that covers 1/60th of the population, it does not seem like there is any other plan to get vaccines in this country. But then, of course, and this is the part that we're taking on in court, whilst not having a plan, the department is still preventing anyone else from making a plan. And that's the only thing that we want, is we want to say, to be one of the buyers, but allow anyone who wants to buy a vaccine to be able to buy it through whatever means possible. Let's get the whole country vaccinated as quickly as possible. Let's not have ambitious rollout plans that look like the smart city plans 2 years ago and are completely unachievable. Let's rather get this done so that we don't have to be in perpetual lockdown until 2023, 2024. We just simply can't afford it.
Very well. Thank you so much for your time. Let's leave it there. Connie Mulder, the head of Solidarity Research Institute, saying that the government's monopoly on buying and distributing the COVID-19 vaccines is something that they want to challenge in court.